So I guess first off, Jack, I guess if you don't mind, introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell us what your role is in the cattle industry.
Yeah, we own a livestock auction in Fallon, Nevada. There's only two auctions in the whole state. They're both in the same town, and we sell about 60,000 head a year. Then we also have a ranch east of Fallon, run on a lot of public land. That's why public land grazing is so important to us, and why we are trying to be involved in decisions that are made there, and helping guide this administration the right direction, and help them understand the struggles that we face out here on the ground.
And most all of the cattle that come to your sale barn would be raised on federal lands.
Oh, I would say this is, purely shooting from the hip, but at least 80%
Okay.
of cattle that come to our barn, and they don't run on public land maybe 12 months out of the year, but you know, at least part of the year they're on public land, part of the year they're on private.
Are they mostly Nevada cattle that come to your barn, or are some from other states?
I'm glad you asked that question, because when we first came here, most of the cattle in the state left to go to other states to be marketed, and very few cattle sold in Nevada. Since we've been here almost 20 years now, and now we get most of Nevada cattle are staying in Nevada to sell, and then we're drawing a lot of cattle in from out of state. We were always told that Nevada was an export only state, that no cattle would ever come here because we don't have any feedlots, we don't have any packing plants. But California is just you'd have to go there to really see it yourself. I hate going over there because the grass is so green, it makes my eyes hurt. But their season is just the opposite of us. So if you've got a 4, 5, or 6 weight calf this time of year, California is the place for those to go. So sending your cattle to Nevada is just on the way to California. So
okay, so most calves go to California from your barn.
Yeah, we have a lot of internet buyers now, more than we used to. So more cattle are going east. Kind of the reputation is getting out about Nevada cattle and just how healthy they are, and they got a little age on them, and they're green. And so our eastern buyers have gotten a taste of them. When I say eastern, I'm talking Nebraska, Kansas. I'm not talking Kentucky or Tennessee. So when I say eastern, sometimes I confuse people when I'm talking about east of Nevada.
Would is Texas a destination for them or not?
Yeah, a few of our cattle go to Texas and Oklahoma. That's one of the things that I've keep bringing up. And they talk about these Texas feedlots that are waiting around for the border to open so they can get some Mexican cattle, and they're all whining and complaining that they're going to have to shut down because they don't have any cattle. Well, there's a lot of good crossbred cattle in Nevada that they could just walk over to their computer, sit down, and go to DV auctions and hit click to bid, and they could have their feedlots. They could have cattle in their feedlots. They don't have to wait for Mexican cattle. I've bought a lot of cattle over the years, and I try to buy them locally. But when I need cattle and I can't get them locally, I go a little further away. If I can't get them there, I go a little further away. And they could do the same thing if they wanted to. But they were just counting on, their Sid Millers and the NCBA and LMA and their friends in the corporate side of this industry to lobby our president and Secretary Rollins to get that border open. And they were pretty confident that they would get that done. And apparently they don't have the pull that they thought they did.
And obviously they get a discount buying those Mexican cattle as compared to the Nevada cattle, price-wise.
Yeah, I think the cattle down there are high. I don't think they're that much cheaper. I think one of the main reasons that they like those cattle down there is the age of them. And keep in mind, most of those feedlots that are buying those Mexican cattle, they got a sweetheart deal with JBS or Tyson, whoever. So they don't get that 30-month rule doc, because if you're buying cattle out of Mexico, I'll promise you, they're all going to be over 30 months by the time they get them processed.
Okay.
So those corporate feedlots have a sweetheart deal, which I'm finding out more and more that as I talk to more and more people about the 30-month rule, many of these bigger players in the game have in their AMA, there is no doc for 30-month rule. That's a whole nother subject for another day. But I was at a roping one time. It was just a practice roping at a arena up in Idaho, and all those steers had M's on them, and so they were really tight in that lead up into the behind the roping chute. So I was just walking along there and grabbing them by their nose and mouthing them, and there was not one steer in there under 5 years old. And these were like 700-pound roping steers. Now I know your beef kind of cattle coming from down there are not going to be that old. They're going to be a different kind of an animal. But I mean, it's desert down there. It's like Nevada. It's more deserty than Nevada. It's like Arizona. So a steer might not weigh 500 pounds till he's a year and a half old.
Right. Yep. Okay. And have you been contacted by any feeders that said, we usually buy Mexican cattle, but we don't have access to them, so we're shopping a new market this year?
Yeah, actually, we have some of our California buyers that buy for people down there said we need Mexicans without the M. Is what they said.
Okay, interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, a little different situation than what we have up here. More so, I mean, we see cattle with the M, like you said, especially rodeo stock.
Mhm.
But then we see the CAN on cattle sometimes too.
Yeah,
So.
and I've only seen a couple of those in my life. Yep.
Yep.
So
Okay.
yeah, like I said, if their feedlots are empty and they need cattle, buying them.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the checkoff. There's been some coverage on social media in the last few weeks about, in particular, one project that was funded by the checkoff. Apparently, I haven't seen confirmation of that yet, but it has the checkoff logo on it.
The little tiny one they don't want you to see.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Like I said, I've reached out to a couple different sources for the checkoff to talk to and have gotten crickets so far, but I'll keep working on
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah,
But
let me tell you what. Just while it's on my mind, they're presenting that. The checkoff is presenting that as, look, we're going to show these students how cattle are such a small percentage of the climate change or the methane. That yes, cattle are part of the problem, but they're a small part of the problem. So that's their push, is they're trying to make it look like they're trying to educate these future consumers that cattle are part of the problem, but they're just minute compared to everything else.
right.
Well, God created those cattle, and he did not screw up. And this whole first thing you have to do is believe that there is climate change and all that. That's the first problem. So by admitting that cattle are giving off methane and are affecting the climate, you've admitted that there is climate change, and that we as humans have some kind of effect on that, and
Mhm.
and that cows do. So my problem is, you take a liberal teacher in San Francisco or somewhere like that already hates cows, is already a vegan. They're going to spin that and say, look, even the ranchers, even the Beef Checkoff, even the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, they admit that they're the problem. I mean, look how easy it would be for the teachers to take that and spin it, that we ourselves admit that we are the problem.
Right. Or even not a liberal teacher. Honestly, I mean, to me, I'm curious what your thoughts are, but I mean, any teacher presenting that information, like you said, is showing their students, just like you pointed out, cattle are a part of the methane problem that we apparently is agreed upon by certain sectors of society.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be natural then for those students to assume that if they eat less beef, they're going to help the environment?
Yes. If there's no cattle out there.
Then even that 2 or 3% or whatever it is that the cattle are contributing, the students, I assume, would feel like I can do my part by cutting that even more.
Right. I agree. I'm just sick, and I don't know who in the right mind would think this is a good idea. So then that makes me go, put my tinfoil hat on and start asking questions like, what are you really trying to do?
Right.
This carnivore diet, and everybody's getting on the carnivore diet, and they're eating less processed food. You know how much money that's costing BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street as these people are getting on the carnivore diet and not eating as much. I mean, I used to eat cereal all the time if I'd get up early and wanted to get going, and knew I was not going to eat for a while, then I would have a bowl of cereal. I mean, I won't even touch that stuff. Now
Mhm.
it's steak and eggs for me, and I think a lot of Americans are are kind of going that direction. So that's costing these ultra processed food companies a lot of money. And so I know they'll say I'm crazy, but you know, we don't, the checkoff is a lot of money that we pay out, that we think it's a lot of money, but look how much money BlackRock is going to lose if the American consumers stop eating processed food and start eating more beef.
Mm-hmm.
And so makes me wonder sometimes, like, is our own checkoff, like, are they getting paid more not to promote beef than we're paying them to promote beef? Because I can't think of any other explanation as to why they would attack Dr. Sean Baker and the carnivore diet and call him crazy and basically demonize the carnivore diet. Like, that is the one thing that they could do to promote beef. And our own beef checkoff, beef promotion won't promote the carnivore diet. Just leaves me scratching my head and coming to conclusions that may not be right, but there is no other answer as to why they would be against the carnivore diet unless somebody was paying them not to spread the word about it.
Right. It seems like absolutely a no-brainer.
Yeah, now we're going to go out and teach kids that beef are causing climate change, and they're putting these 6-foot tall park benches along the ocean to show people that the sea level is rising. I mean, it's just crazy. But then you connect all of that to this Angus deal and the methane, and you know, you can continue raising cattle, but if you buy your bulls from us over here, the ones who just happen to have the most environmentally friendly bulls, then you can be part of the solution instead of being the problem, you know. So that's why a portion of our industry is buying into this BS, is because they got their hand in the cookie jar. They got a plan they're working on that's going to make them the only ones that have these climate friendly genetics, you know.
Well, and along with that, like the one educational project that one of them, there's a couple of them, it looked to me like, that were focused on methane, but one of them actually called on the students to write a plan to give, you know, it was pretend, is my understanding, but a pretend plan to give to a rancher on how he could feed his cattle differently to have them produce less methane. And it's
Did you
my
say feed or breed or both?
feed.
Yeah, feed
Mhm.
and breed. Yes.
Right.
Buy
Yep.
buy this stuff from Bill Gates and vaccinate your cattle with this from Bill Gates, and buy these bulls from the methane mafia, as I like to call them, and you can be part of the solution.
Mhm. Yeah. And then where does that leave us? I guess if it, for one thing, as an industry, if we've said that we believe that our cattle are contributing to climate change and that we just have to do XYZ to lower it, what's the low, how low is low enough?
Right. Yeah. I'll just tell you, you know, during Christmas, I was joking with my friends. I would say, you know, Merry Christmas, and unless you're part of the Angus Association, it's Happy Holidays. You know, because you know, Christmas. If God messed up when He made these cows, then I don't think you can say Merry Christmas, because He screwed up these cows. And thank God we have the Montana Angus Mafia and the California Angus Mafia and the Angus Association to fix these cows, or we could all die, you know. And so it's really noble of them to fix God's mistake on these cows. And so I'm pretty sure that they must all say Happy Holidays, you know.
Well, and especially when we have the lowest cattle numbers we've had in 60 or 70 years,
Right.
and if we're still in theory concerned about the methane that they're putting out,
Yeah.
then
And you know,
where
in
the
their whole efficiency plan, they talk about producing beef on less acres. Who made them God that and made them king for a day that we need to use less acres?
right.
Why don't we use more acres? If we use more acres, we would rebuild our economy. These rural communities would have more cash flow. That money turns over several times within that community within a year. The answer to this is more acres, not less acres. So we need to ask that question. What are you guys' goal here? And then you throw in the beef on dairy deal, and that big plan is just we don't need to run cattle out here on the range anymore. We can just let all this burn or rewild it for buffalo or whatever, and we'll just raise all these cattle in these concrete slab feedlots. Me personally, I like cattle. I like my cattle to be happy and comfortable. I like to see a cow laying underneath the shade tree, and I like to go up in the mountains and see my cows laying in a pass, with the breeze blowing the flies off of them. And I like to see cattle happy, and I like to eat beef that came from a place where cattle get to be happy.
Where it's
I
been
have no desire to eat your crate raised GMO corn fed animal that's never seen the light of day. I mean, I'm just not into that. I don't, you can call them free range chickens and free range hogs. And can you believe we're coming to a point where you could actually promote free range beef? Like who would have ever thought that we would be raising cattle in these concrete methane digester feedlots? And that's America. I mean, they're free to do that if they want to, but don't get on your high horse and look down your nose at me and act like you're some kind of elite genius because you're raising cattle on a slab,
and telling us that it's more environmentally friendly.
Yeah, exactly. Just makes my blood boil.
And everything, all the manure has to be hauled out or dealt with in some way. And it's irony at its most pure form.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. So along with that, and on this kind of subject, like we kind of touched on, of the lower cattle numbers, has Checkoff contributed to the higher prices we're seeing, or is it totally separate from the
Checkoff? The Checkoff absolutely. The Checkoff has absolutely contributed to the higher prices we're seeing right now, because the Checkoff was used through the implementation fee to pay lobbyists to lobby against MCOOL, to lobby against antitrust laws, to lobby for everything that is good for the packers and bad for the ranchers. So as ranchers go out of business, those of us who have survived get paid more for our cattle. So yes, we can stand up and say the Checkoff is responsible for this higher market, because they did such a shitty job of promoting American beef and cutting our throats that so many of us went broke, that now those of us who survived are getting paid more for our cattle. So when they talk about that return on investment of $14 to every one invested or whatever, they've helped the beef market, but not the way that they want everybody to think they have.
That's pretty interesting take.
Well, that's how I feel about it, and I mean, I'll feel that way till the day I die, because I've just seen it happen. You can't lobby against MCOOL with our Checkoff money and then turn around and say that you're helping the price of beef. It's just ridiculous. And then the fact that, I mean, don't even get me started on their whole. You can't disparage against another source of protein, so you can't even say anything negative about fake beef. You just let them get away with calling it beef. I mean, they shouldn't have even been able to call it beef. Thank God the American consumers said no thanks, because our Checkoff sure as hell didn't come out swinging against them.
Right.
And I understand back in the day when the Checkoff, whenever that was, the late 80s, early 90s, whenever that was, and they said, we don't want to be using this money to beat up on pork and chicken. I get it. But this lab-grown, cancer-filled garbage is not pork or chicken. That's not another source of protein. That's a source of poison.
Right.
And I mean, the NCBA, the U.S. Cattlemen's, RCAF, Farm Bureau, everybody should have been beating the doors down in Washington, D.C., saying, hey, it's time to change this Checkoff so that we can disparage another source of protein, if that source of protein is this lab-grown beef. But everybody's scared to open Pandora's box, because NCBA is scared to death that they might lose. The Checkoff might get reformed and they might lose control of it. So they would rather have a really, really bad Checkoff right now that is a total broken joke, because they get all the money, than they would to rebuild it from the ground up the right way, because they're in fear that they may lose it.
Right. Okay. So that actually brings me to another question. Can the checkoff be fixed in your opinion, or does it need
Can it be fixed?
fixing, scrapping it?
Yeah, it can be fixed. But I would say just scrap it and then just rebuild from the ground up. Or if you're going to try to fix what you have there, you've pretty much got to just eliminate it and get it down to just the bare nuts and bolts and then start over.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you let the current people who have control of it have the say on how it gets rebuilt, nothing good will come out of it.
Right, right.
And we have a Secretary of Agriculture right now that, I mean, she gets it. She understands. So if there's ever an opportunity to get this checkoff rebuilt, now is the time.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. And I mean, you are kind of seen by a lot of us as our lifeline to the administration, where you've had a chance to meet with Secretary Rollins, to meet with the president. So yeah, I guess, do you believe there will be some changes coming administratively at all? Do you see Congress doing anything? What do you believe could happen?
Yeah, I don't have a real, solid feel on that. When I was there, the times that I was there, we were there to discuss public land grazing, but I definitely brought up the checkoff because, we can't fix public land grazing and we can't get the American cow herd rebuilt unless we fix our problems in the marketplace, because nobody's going to go out here and borrow more money and buy ranches and take that risk if they have no faith in their market.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the points that I just kept trying to get across the whole time I was there is we've got to get these American ranchers confidence and know that their own government is not going to be the next black swan like we suffered through here this fall,
Right.
So yeah, checkoff. And of course, part of the group that was with us, being NCBA guys, or a guy from NCBA, he, we were at lunch with Secretary Rollins, and I brought up the checkoff, and he just jumped my case right there in front of her that I was wrong about the checkoff, that they don't lobby. They can't use that money for lobbying. But what he doesn't understand is the implementation fee. It's just like USA. They just skim that money off the top, and then they can do whatever they want to with it.
Right.
They might not be taking the money that's for the actual AR and using it to lobby. But if it's a $10 million AR and they charge themselves $5 million to implement that AR, then they got $5 million to do whatever they want to with. And that's how they pay for politicians. Pay campaign donations to politicians and pay lobbyists. And I don't know where these NCBA elites think that their money comes from.
Right.
And so I'm going to keep, I've been through my sources and my connections with Secretary Rollins and RFK and Burgum, and I've been sending as much information about the checkoff as I possibly can. And this deal that they did with the schools and the methane, they're just digging their own hole. Whoever's in charge of that is, we need to send them a Christmas card and a thank you for helping Secretary Rollins understand who they really are and what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good point. It is making maybe some of the problems more clear than they were before,
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Yes. And that, again, you kind of brought up another aspect that I wanted to visit with you about, again, with the smaller cattle herd and better cattle prices that we're seeing right now. And I think I know what you're going to say here, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Are we in a great spot now as the U.S. cattle industry? Have we solved all of our issues now? Are we just set to go as long as, our price is going to hold? And are you seeing people retain heifers, or is there work that needs to be done to try to restore that confidence like you talked about in the industry?
There's a lot of work needs to be done. And what I always tell people is the best time to put a deer guard on your pickup is before you hit the deer. And right now we're just going 100 miles an hour and we're going down through some windy meadows with a lot of deer, and it's dark, and we're just going along like there's no deer, there's a lot of deer. And so we need to pull over right now and put a deer guard on before we hit one. And that's where we're at in this cattle industry. We've got a good market right now. A horrible market and a broken system has kind of fixed itself. And so now we're reaping the rewards of so many producers going out of business. And it's, are the numbers going to increase? I don't think that they are. I just personally don't think that the younger generations are not coming home to run these ranches. The older generations are getting out. These high prices are causing more of them to come to town. Like at our sale barn, we never see dispersals ever. The only cows that anybody ever sells in Nevada is an open cow, an old cow, a fat dry cow that hasn't raised a calf, or some cow that keeps tearing down fences or whatever. Nobody ever sells an honest set of cows in Nevada. And we've had several dispersals this year where people are just like, hey, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. They're all seeing 2015 coming at them. And that's, we're not seeing these bred cows. And, a bred cow is supposed to be worth what 2 good steers are worth. And so today, 2 good 5-weight steers will bring $2,400. So that would make a bred cow $4,800. And out here, we're seeing, kind of 3,500 is the highest that we've seen on bred cows.
Okay.
So,
that's
and
not
then
enough confidence.
No. And then you see these hamburger cows, they're at the lowest right now that they've been all year because there's quite a few of them around. But come summer, they're going to get so high that there's going to be more and more pregnant cows going to slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't see the numbers increasing. I don't see people keeping heifers. One of the points I tried to get across in DC is if ranchers feel that black swan is coming and they want to pay down some debt this year, they can't because they have to give some of it away in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that this administration, instead of giving us like a incentive to keep heifers, just let us keep our own money. And instead of turning around and giving us subsidies or handouts for drought and all that, just stop taxing us so much and taking our money and then giving it back. It's kind of like a friend in Oregon said, it's like money laundering. They take it away from you in taxes and then give it back to you in subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're skimming off the top, just let these ranchers keep their own money. So if this year, if I wanted to pay down debt and I wanted to sell a bunch of heifers or old cows or something, I could take that money and put it into a spot where I could save it for next year if we had a bad year, or I could pay down debt with it. But currently, you just got to go buy back more cattle or more equipment that you could get by without, or hay or something, in order to keep from giving it all away to a government that with the whole Minnesota deal right now, it just drives home the point that we don't want to pay taxes because we know that they're not using it for what it should be used for.
Right. And it also kind of highlights, just the likelihood and risk of huge amounts of money being managed by the government and accessible by those who want to contract with the government. It's just, it seems to be an opening for fraud every time.
Yes.
The more money there is, the more risk there is that somebody's going to try to take it wrongly.
Yeah. This whole cattle deal just doesn't need to be so complicated. We've just intentionally made it so complicated.
Mm-hmm.
We just have a cow and she has a calf, and we let it grow up and treat it the best we can while it's alive, and use it to create tax revenue for our country, and use that tax revenue to rebuild our infrastructure and support our military. And, that's what it needs to be used for, not going over to some other country and then that money just ends up getting laundered back to our politicians. We're just in a wreck. And, man, of some things. I know Trump's not even been in there a year, but we need to start seeing some results. We know the fraud is there. We know the corruption is there, but yet nobody gets arrested. You see a lot of that on social media now. People are like, hey, if nobody's going to get arrested, we don't want to pay taxes anymore,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So.
Okay. And then, so in addition to the, like what you're talking about with maybe making some changes to how we could, in theory, save some of our money tax-free, what are some policy issues that could help restore confidence to industry? And even that, what are some policy issues if you want to go there.
Mhm.
We need to not spend our time on.
Well, I would say, and there'll be a lot of critics that just think M-Cool is the stupidest thing ever. But man, we had high priced cattle in 2014 when we had M-Cool, and then M-Cool went away and the market crashed. All the experts will like to say that that was just purely supply and demand, and I say BS. If M-Cool had nothing to do with it, then let's do a little experiment and put M-Cool back in place and see what happens.
Right.
If the American consumers had the choice, 90 some percent of them are going to choose American beef. And the argument always is, no, they're gonna price shop. Well, I mean, when we feed our beef off of our ranch to our friends, family, customers at the sale barn, they're like, this is the best beef we've ever ate. And that's the problem right now. In this country, people are not eating American beef. I see the news come out today about China doing tariffs. That to me is good news, because we don't need to be sending our premium beef over to China, because those export dollars never trickle down to the ranchers.
Right.
Those export dollars go into the pockets of foreign-owned packing companies. And so if we could get these American consumers eating American beef, this beef demand would increase more than it already has. I mean, look, here we are increasing the demand for beef while we feed them imported beef.
Right.
If we start feeding these Americans good beef, the demand's going to continue to go up. And so anyway, M-Cool, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Even if the checkoff was just neutralized to where it wasn't being used against us, the even doctors are prescribing beef now as medicine. So they're doing more to promote beef than the checkoff is. So even if the checkoff wasn't promoting beef, if it was just not being used to undercut us, that would be a win, in my opinion.
Maybe we could throw a hole and throw a match on it, and
Yeah,
better use.
yeah. But as far as just what's going on in this country to get this American cow herd revitalized and people back into the business, taxes would be a big part of it. Truth in labeling would be a big part of it. Right now, you just see it doesn't take very much supply away from the big guys, the captive supply guys, as we call them. You don't have to take very much supply away from them, and you totally change the leverage in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just explaining it to somebody yesterday who's kind of a non-cow guy. I was trying to explain it to him, what it's like when the Packers don't have to compete for our cattle. I use the analogy of like potatoes. Let's say that some big company that's making French fries or whatever, if they have financed all of these farmers, and these farmers are producing enough potatoes, then if you got somebody producing a few potatoes in their backyard, they have to go try to sell them on the street because there's no demand for them to one of these corporate companies, because that corporate company already has all of its needs met with its captive supply. But if you get a disease in those potatoes or something, and there you go, like the screwworm in cattle, and then that supply shortens up, all of a sudden that little independent guy that's raising some potatoes in his backyard, he has a chance in the marketplace. And that's where we're at right now in this cattle industry, is we've taken just enough supply away from the captive supply guys and given it to the independents that we're tipping the scale in this market by just 5%. And that's what I always say. If you sell beef locally, even if you only doing 2 to 3 or maybe 5% of our total numbers get used to sell beef locally, and those animals come out of the big vertical integration model, that could be enough to give us our leverage back.
Right.
And so I feel like that is currently happening. I was talking to a friend here just a couple of days ago, and he was talking about in Texas, and he was also talking about up north that some of those big corporate feedlots are really short of cattle right now.
And it does look to be, well, I guess, I mean, do you foresee the border with Mexico opening soon? Do you have a feel on that?
Corporate Wall says every day that it's going to open. I don't know where he gets that information. My sources say that no, it's not until they've got the screwworm cleaned up and pushed down and monitored for several months. Now, the excuse they're using now is that, well, with colder weather, the flies are going to be easier to contain, and they might open the border. But
Okay.
I just don't see the border opening myself. I could be dead wrong. I hope that I'm right though, because it's that border being closed has totally changed the dynamics of this business. Even in our state, we're seeing these crossbred cattle that normally are discounted a lot. They're selling right up there next to the black cattle.
Okay. Yep. And this is something I've wanted to research, but I really haven't found much out on it. But um, are those cattle going to end up coming into the U.S. in the form of beef? Do you think those Mexican cattle that can't come across right now?
Well, that was one of the things that first came out, is all of a sudden we're getting all this boxed beef from Mexico. And I asked the question, did Mexico just go build these huge processing facilities overnight, and all of a sudden they've just got boxed beef ready for us? I mean, that was beef that was being shipped into Mexico from Brazil, because we had tariffs on Brazil, and Mexico was at a lower tariff. And so they were backdooring Brazilian beef through Mexico, just like China was doing with their little trinkets, backdooring them through Mexico
Right.
at a lower tariff, you know? And so the discussion is amongst the industry that Mexico is going to build all these processing facilities, and we're going to lose all that business, and these corporate feedlots in Texas aren't going to get to make that income and use all that feed to fatten those cattle, and we're still going to get the beef anyway. And I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. They have to be able to process it, and like you said, that's what I've understood, is they aren't set up to do that, or
right.
But maybe they're. I don't know. I don't claim to know.
Yeah, I don't claim to know either. And I just, I ask people all the time, why is it America's responsibility to bail out every country that overproduces?
Mm-hmm.
We're overproducing corn right now. What countries are coming to rescue us? Nobody.
Right.
But Mexico and Canada, not so much Canada probably, or maybe they are. I'll just stay neutral on that one because I don't have the answer. But Mexico is producing way more cattle than they consume. And so it's America's responsibility to bail them out and take their cattle while we let our own domestic producers go broke.
Right.
I mean, America first is supposed to be America first. We shouldn't have to apologize for that.
Right. Or again, even with the feedlots that are typically reliant on those Mexican cattle, and I mean, they weren't doing anything illegal. I understand that, but I found it interesting that some people feel like it's the entire U.S. cattle industry's responsibility to help them gain access again to those Mexican cattle, so that so they don't go broke. When what hand did we get from the U.S. cattle industry the last 10 years when we couldn't pay our bills on what we were getting per calf that we sold?
Yeah. One of the points that I've made is, and I'm not suggesting that we should do this, but if we're going to import Mexican cattle to save the poor packer and to save these corporate feedlots in Texas, shouldn't somebody like you or me have the opportunity to buy those cattle in intact females for breeding? Like, why are we bringing in Mexican cattle just to benefit JBS, Tyson, Cargill, and National?
Right.
And some corporate feedlots in Texas that are financed by JBS, Tyson, Cargill, and National. Why do only that sector of our industry get to benefit from Mexican cattle? I mean, I run on a desert operation, and I intentionally breed cattle that are like Mexican cattle that have ear and will travel.
Mm-hmm.
And I would take some of those heifers to stock my ranch if you're going to cross cattle. Now, I would rather have the border stay closed, trust me. Mm-hmm. But if they're going to open the border and let cattle across, why does it have to be steers and spayed heifers?
Right. Yeah.
If Mexico has more cattle than they can consume, and it's our responsibility to save them, and we're trying to increase the American cattle numbers, there's our solution right there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so anyway,
right.
As far as the beef in Mexico, I had a conversation with an individual through a Facebook post. I said, maybe Mexico, instead of focusing so much attention on trying to get their cattle up here to market them, maybe they should focus on helping lift their own citizens out of poverty to where their own citizens can afford beef. Because, Mexico, nobody of the Mexican people that I've been around, they like beef and they eat a lot of beef. And if they could afford more beef, they'd eat more beef. So maybe their focus should be to lift their own people out of poverty where they can afford beef, rather than push them so hard to shove it across the border onto us and to break our domestic market.
Right. That's a very good point. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was getting at too, is with, do I feel sympathy for those feedlots that their business model isn't working anymore? I mean, I understand where they're at, but what about those of us who have, like I said, for years, we've been affected negatively by those because we're competing with them, and there's no sympathy for us.
Well, let's just take it to a different industry. Let's take it to building guitars or tables. If you've set up your entire model of building tables or guitars off of imported wood from other countries, and there's some kind of disease in that country, or there's a trade war or whatever, and we're no longer importing that lumber from those countries to build whatever you're building, that's your fault. You set up your model. You set your model up to build your business around a product from another country across a border. That border may get closed. So don't come whining to me because you set up your whole model off of imported cattle. I'm sorry. That was your decision, not ours.
Right. And in your example of lumber or whatever, it's probably not going to affect the health of the trees in the US when you bring in this imported lumber. Maybe if it has like those beetles in it or something.
Right.
But with cattle industry, it's not even, the reason that they're not coming in is because of obviously a parasite that can harm.
Yeah. And then you see the NCBA, old Colin Woodall, turns around and says that it's more of just a trade war and it's about politics and not about the screwworm,
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want to waste too much of your time.
Yeah, I've got this dinner I'm supposed to be at it too, so it's about an hour drive to town. Yeah. Anything else you want to wrap up on?
Nope. I think that I thought about talking with you about the Product USA, the voluntary role, if you want to touch on that.
Well, I probably shouldn't because I don't understand it. Like the voluntary is voluntary. Like it just has no teeth, Somebody a lot smarter than me is going to have to explain to me what this new. And when I was in DC, it wasn't Secretary Rollins, but it was somebody that worked for her, tried explaining it to me and said that we're going to start a campaign to push through the American consumer to let them know that they've been lied to and that product of the USA doesn't mean product of the USA. And I still didn't totally understand what point she was trying to make. I mean, it just seems so black and white to me. What good is voluntary going to do? And who has to volunteer to put that label on? JBS?
And again, I think, like we've talked about so many times, that the consumer USDA label find USA product. It's just, even the US cattle industry, we're not. It's like you said, these people are so complex. Even our ranchers don't.
Carrie, I guess this doesn't work when I'm driving. I mean, I'm in good service, but it just cut the internet service out just enough. So
okay. I think I've long enough, and I know you need to get going. So I think we've covered what I had hoped. So
okay. Well, I'm sorry I bounce around so much in my answers, but it's what happens when you talk to somebody that's got ADHD.
Yeah. No, you've been very helpful. I really appreciate your insight here, and we will be talking again soon, I'm sure. So
okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Jack.
Okay, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Okay, bye-bye.